Members of the committee, I intend to focus on the changes we have made to address your concerns. In light of concerns, we have reduced our numbers to 225 in agreement with the Home Office and G4S. We trust this is received favourably. The Council's Housing Standards team approved 240 persons, and therefore 225 more than meets their requirements. There will be no overcrowding. We provided typical floor layouts to officers and a breakdown of the sizes and mix of accommodation within the management plan, which you've heard before you tonight, with no more than 10 persons per floor, and each users will be restricted to the floor they are living on. On a strategic level, G4S have committed, pending planning approval, to an overall decrease of the number of asylum seekers in Derby, which we trust is welcomed. This will be achieved by not procuring any further dispersed accommodation. And specifically for Abbey Ward, we have confirmed that G4S will not reuse their dispersed accommodation. So over time, the number of asylum seekers living in the ward will reduce, with each vacant property returning to the market. The advantage of reducing the number to 225 means we can address your concerns over idle time and how we integrate learning and activities into the running of the centre. We now have an entire ground floor dedicated to activity space where Urban Housing Services will work with the voluntary organisations to provide activities on and off site. To ensure this will be achieved and not create a burden on the existing voluntary sector, UHS will appoint a volunteer coordinator based on the site funded by G4S and UHS. This works extremely well in our Wakefield Centre where we have a comprehensive and varied programme of activities. Staffing was a previous concern, and in our management plan we have confirmed that when at full occupancy 20 staff will be employed, including 2 overnight security personnel. This is in addition to the service migrant help staff based in the building and the aforementioned volunteer coordinator. These staffing numbers are robust and tested in our other centres and mean we are certain in our ability to operate effectively. Community liaison is key for all stakeholders, and we have committed in our management plan to effective operational engagement. We will keep officers and members updated on progress, and they will be invited to site prior to opening. We will play an active role in the established multi-agency meetings within Derby. In addition to direct contact, we will hold quarterly meetings locally to engage with local stakeholders. Equally, we are open to engaging with the Council's area coordinator and working with them. Site security and safety is covered in the management plan, includes an upgraded CCTV system, monitored 24 hours a day. Security staff will be on site day and night undertaking security checks. In our experience, users pose no greater risk to public safety, and equally the police have not raised this concern. We trust, Chair, that we have adequately, comprehensively addressed all your previous concerns and that you can support your officer's recommendation to support. Thank you.
Mr. Robsell.
Thank you, Chair. Whilst the approval of an initial accommodation centre is not desirable, I recognise that decision must remain for the committee to make. I will not restate my concerns in detail, but ask committee to consider these contexts of effect on the character of the neighbourhood, an increase in population density, detrimental impact on local amenities for the existing residents. I appreciate the reduction to 225 and the commitment to reconfigure the accommodation to ensure people have a level of dignity in their living arrangements. I must stress, though, Chair, that the ratio of people to space and amenities confirms to our emergency accommodation standards only. If people will be staying beyond these limits, the HMO standards would apply, limiting overall occupancy to only 192 people. So, should you grant approval tonight, a condition on planning is required that any approval limits the use of the site for initial accommodation only. I am concerned that limited details have been supplied regarding residential engagement. There is a commitment to quarterly public meetings at the local facility and a complaints procedure. Assurances that this will be taken seriously and mitigated are still needed, and if possible, made a condition of any approval. I'm aware that G4S are in discussion with local voluntary groups to provide activities. These services are stretched, meeting the needs of existing asylum dispersals, and without additional funding, it is unclear how this will be achieved. A further assurance is needed that the plans will be in place to reduce potential tensions and how these will be reviewed. I believe Planning Committee can place a condition on the length of planning approval for a limited period, allowing a review of any negative impacts. So I would suggest that this would be appropriate considering the community impacts raised. I appreciate that this is a difficult decision for the committee and urge you to listen to the concerns of the local residents in the area. However, should your decision be to approve the application, I similarly urge you to invoke the conditions I have set out. Any approval limits the use of the site for initial accommodation use only and no other purpose. Resident engagement is taken seriously and concerns responded to as a responsible housing provider. Limit approval to 1 year to allow a complete review of the impact. Thank you for listening, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Afzal. Sarah, would you like to come back on some of the concerns?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. There's just a few issues that have been raised. Just in terms of the occupancy and the space standards, concerns about the room sizes, I just refer members to the comments of the Housing Standards team, where they've looked at the assessment based on bed and breakfast and temporary accommodation. They do feel that family rooms are considered to be suitable for use as temporary accommodation, and that in terms of the space requirements, they are happy that they meet the Derby City Council's guidance on space provision and amenity. So, you know, we would take their guidance on board in terms of looking at the number of rooms and whether they're appropriate. Obviously, they've deemed that a limit of 230 would be acceptable to meet those standards. Obviously, the applicant has recommended request 225. So we feel that it does meet that occupancy standard. In terms of security, obviously I note the concerns of the objectors, but the management plan does specifically set out the management and security arrangements for the site, and we do recommend a condition which would obviously clarify the details of that security arrangement, which we could sort with our police liaison officer in respect to those. In terms of conditions, we can attach a condition to agree the terms of any community engagement that the applicant would have with the local community. And in terms of a temporary permission, we could potentially attach a condition for 2 years if members wished, just to see if the use is acceptable and if any issues were raised during that time.
Thank you, Sarah. Committee members?